Bruh, y'all really need to take some singing lessons from Bondora. Now that witch knows how to hold a note. This one opened with him reaffirming that they totes added in that cut of him smiling in the last episode. I mean, if anything, he was still very much bitter that he hadn't held any significant advantage over the girls, especially with Peach on their side. Thus, the Crab Devil tried to recall some of his own pets in the form of the Black Lights. He managed to retrieve it from some of the lower tier monsters, but wasn't getting it from any of the girls' immediate rogues gallery. I'd assume this is because they were relatively stronger and had gotten used to their powers, even if some were bigger jobbers than others. Regardless, him wanted a total recall, so he invited them to a sushi party at his penthouse. Dude, if you want to be a JoJo character, just wait until All-Stars battle. Notably, Princess and Sedusa were absent. The latter because she was still unaware of her other self, and her boyfriend wanted to keep it that way. Yeah, Soichiro, you're doing the right thing and everything, but didn't you also say that you also love the Snake Lady equally? Just saying, dude, don't limit your options. Little error here with the subtitles, as Himiko actually says Ginza Jubei, which isn't a real sushi restaurant, but is likely based off of a real life chain called Ginza Kyubei, and I wasn't talking about you. Regardless, him had more than enough moochers coming to his little party. And this did lead to a funny bit between Ace and Mojo with their voices being perched down to signify that they were fat! Could have gone without some of the literal toilet humor that just makes me wonder which end it came out from. But before I could ask any more, the host arrived. Pretty sure that's how most people react when dealing with Frieza. He tried to convince the monsters to temporarily relinquish their powers to him so that they could make them stronger. And to the Jobber Squad's credit, they didn't trust the guy who is the actual devil. And realizing he wasn't going to sucker them in immediately, him at least met them halfway and offered to organize a cooperative with them to defeat the girls. As a part of their agreement, he gave them some special tights to power them up. And it seemed to work, as Mojo managed to cause some damage without any help from his machines, and instead took a play out of that one Gold Ranger monster who keeps appearing in all of those big Sentai crossovers for whatever reason. Seriously, does Toei just have a thing for that old costume? And who would want to put that thing on their head? Still, nostalgic or not, Mojo by himself wasn't enough to beat the girls. However, it soon became clear that he wasn't alone. This led into a not-so-well animated sequence of the monsters beating up the girls, but hey, at least it got across that they were being overwhelmed, which is pretty cool to see with these jobbers, who thanks to Fuzzy managed to even capture Peach. However, while Him's tights made them stronger, they still lacked in the IQ department, so the girls managed to escape while they argued over who should finish them off. Well, I do think they'd have an easier time getting some 401ks than us at this point. The monsters reported back to him, who reprimanded them for not finishing off the girls when they had the chance. He was especially hard on Mojo, who he later took to the side to tell him that he was just giving the monkey some tough love, whilst clearly lying through his teeth, as even Peach pointed out. Honestly, this is one of my favorite parts of the episode, as it really did show how this version of him is much more of a manipulator. Not to say the OG version couldn't get pretty Faustian at times, but overall he definitely put more focus on his intimidation factor rather than using more roundabout methods like this version. Which makes sense, as this one has a lot more weaknesses, but I wouldn't say he's any less dangerous, as just through some subtle manipulation, he was essentially forming a cult. Lure followers in with a simple yet common need, i.e. food, present your mission statement, if they refuse, give them more benefits to make their lives easier, gaslight, encourage, and then throw in a little brainwashing for good measure. Though in this case, it's not even that rage inducement that his OG counterpart did to all of Townsville, but rather the power of suggestion that many real-life factious dictators have used. Have their exhausted subjects repeat some lines to make them a little more susceptible to some future commands. It's still writing like this that unfortunately kind of gets lost in the shuffle of an otherwise over-the-top show, especially this close to the end, but I also don't think it should be underappreciated either. Anyway, Mojo was left in charge of literally dismantling Peach. Mojo Jojo, the OG Princess Precure. Excuse me, I need to go visit the bathroom. Fortunately, the girls stopped him and took both the monkey and Peach back to the lab. They tried to interrogate Mojo, but he had already been too far indoctrinated. To make matters worse, him was indeed amplifying the powers of the monsters, both to make defeating the girls easier, and to give himself more to absorb when the time was right. Realizing that they needed the power to once again seal him away, the prof showed the girls a little something that they had been working on. Yep, appropriately for the grand finale to the series, we got one of the coolest things for the OG series, as long as you ignore that crappy second episode, the Dynamo. Though, while the OG was a single super robot that combined elements of all three girls, this Z version was not only more Japanese, but also more toy animation styled, as some could tell just by the fact that it started off as 3 separate jets before. Yep, it was a Getter-Robo, one of the earliest examples of a combined mech that even had multiple forms. This included the ground-based speedster Getter 2, the water-based tank Getter 3, and the sky-based all-rounder Getter 1. It's held up in the same super robot pantheon as the Mazinger family, even though Golden Guy played a very secondary hand in its creation, just suggesting that they should be combining jets instead of cars, which is still a good suggestion, by the way. Regardless, their anime were created by Toei, so they could make as many references to them as they wanted to then and even now. Also, on a little side note, as the OG combining mech, designing toys with that feature has been notoriously difficult to produce without making a ton of compromises to the original designs, as they really did play insanely fast and loose with how the ships would just change shape and even colors on the fly. This was even reflected here, as the girls made the equivalent of Getter 1 with Blossom 1, I guess. And don't get me wrong, any Getter combination sequence is pretty damn awesome, including in this very show. I'm just saying, don't expect to find a good combining Getter-Robo, at least at a reasonable price. If anything, I just suggest trying to get individual versions of each of the Robos. FYI, the Dino Getters are my favorite designs for the Getter-Robos. I mean, just look at this thing. By the way, awesome touch having Dynamo Z's hair act as Getter 1's cape. But yeah, on that rightfully high note, the episode ended with the girls flying off to seemingly go defeat him, which, yeah, we'll talk about next time. This was just a low-key setup episode for the actual grand finale to the series, which, as such, it did its job more than admirably. They effectively set up the threat of him commanding all of the girls' rogues gallery, as well as very subtle manipulation that's obviously going to lead to a betrayal. And of course, they just had that epic reveal of the show's version of the Dynamo. Granted, there wasn't much else to it, but damn if it wasn't a treat for PPG fans, and even some more casual Super Robot fans. While it is a shame that a lot of this stuff is only really showing up at the tail end of this anime, they are still very interesting elements that help to further distinguish this show with what it was originally based on. This version of him, while not immediately as omnipotent as his OG version, is a lot more conniving and manipulative. Just the way he goes about subtly brainwashing his minions is in some ways even scarier, as these are pretty much real-world mechanics at work rather than instantly magicking them to his whims. It was also pretty neat to see the division of villains with the Goon Squad argue amongst themselves, while other more neutral parties like Kimiko and Sakurako stayed out of it. However, the main event was of course just that little bit of Dynamo Z, which was pretty sweet, especially when the series' main theme started to hit those vocals. And don't worry, we'll get to see a lot more of this glorious Getter reference next time. And overall, while this was mostly just set up, with much of the fun actually coming from the village just putzing around, it served its purpose for a much greater cause at least. However, as things like this and the delicious party are coming to an end, new beginnings arise. We'll be sure to keep you up on any interesting updates we get from stuff like the website, where we did get a few interesting little factoids about the new characters and especially the staff. For now though, we'll step away from Precure and instead look at some more adjacent stuff like a parody with Way of the Husband's Polycure. Look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and
Combine, damn you!
Well, there's one guy who took a little bit too much influence from the Getters.
Fine!